When a woman pulls back, it's not random. It's not because she's busy. It's not because life got complicated. It's because she senses something about you. And what she senses will decide if she comes closer or vanishes. You ever feel like things were going amazing? Then out of nowhere, she switched up? You thought she was into you. You thought there was something real. Then suddenly, the texts slow down. Her tone changes. The warmth fades. You ask yourself, did I do something wrong? Let's talk about the 5 biggest mistakes men make when a woman pulls back. And more importantly, how to never make them again. Each one, a trap. And most men walk into all 5. Blind. Comment, no more chasing. Number 1. You chase. When she pulls back, you chase because you think you're losing something that mattered. But what you're actually doing is throwing away everything you've built within yourself for a chance to beg for the temporary attention of someone who doesn't even respect you enough to communicate directly anymore. And in that chase, you don't just lose her, you lose you. And that's the tragedy most men don't realize until it's too late. Because the moment she pulls back is the moment most of you default to panic and obsession, obsessing over her every word, her tone, her emojis, her last seen status, checking her social media, trying to decode what went wrong, trying to fix something that probably wasn't broken. But what she's really doing is testing you without telling you she's testing you. Because the game isn't about love or connection anymore, it's about power. And the moment she senses that she's the sun around which your world spins, she pulls back. Not because she doesn't like you, but because now she's bored, now she's not curious. Now she feels like she already has you, and there's nothing left to figure out. And what do you do in that moment? You become the exact version of a man who validates her pulling away. You chase harder, you text longer, you show up uninvited, you offer to talk, to explain, to prove your worth. And in doing so, you confirm the one thing she needed to be sure of before disappearing completely. That you are available on demand, that your self-respect is conditional on her approval, that you will collapse under the weight of her indifference. And the more you chase, the more she validates her decision to back off. Because the man who doesn't chase is the man who keeps her attention. And not because he's playing a game, but because he is the game. Because he knows that no amount of effort can compensate for a woman's loss of desire. He knows that if she truly wanted to talk, she would. And if she doesn't, he doesn't beg for what's no longer mutual. Because a man with vision doesn't stop moving. Because someone who once showed interest suddenly acts like a stranger. And most men don't have that vision. Most men are trained to seek permission to feel worthy. Trained to think that chasing shows commitment. Trained to believe that fixing someone else's doubt is somehow noble. But what it really shows is your lack of grounding, and she sees it the moment you fold. The moment you agree to anything just to keep her around. The moment you start arguing for your value instead of living it. And maybe you've done it too. You felt her energy shift, you felt the warmth fade, and instead of falling back, you showed up more. You thought more effort meant more love. More texts meant more clarity. More attention would bring her closer. But it didn't, did it? It pushed her further. And the more you tried to bring her back, the colder she got. And deep down, you felt it. You knew you were giving away too much of yourself. But you couldn't stop because you were addicted to the idea of her, to the fantasy of what you thought this connection could become. And you chased not because she was the one, but because the rejection threatened your ego, because it made you question if you were enough. And that pain of possibly being discarded made you fight for someone who wasn't even fighting for you. And that's the trap. You confuse her pulling back as something to fix instead of something to walk away from. And what would happen if, instead of chasing, you turned inward? What if instead of reacting, you sat in that discomfort and asked yourself, why does this hurt? What am I afraid of losing? Why do I think her approval determines my value? Because when you stop chasing and start questioning, you begin to rebuild the most important foundation you'll ever need: self-respect. And from that place, you no longer need her reply. You no longer crave her attention because you're too focused on becoming someone that even you don't want to let down. And from that place, you see clearly. Anyone who pulls away without respect or communication is not someone you chase. They're someone you let go of. And not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your own dignity to explain your worth to someone who already saw it and decided to gamble it anyway. And you begin to realize that chasing only feeds the dynamic she's already decided she wants to test. Will you fold or will you rise? Will you beg or will you build? Will you react or will you respond with nothing but progress? And when you choose to build, to grow, to walk away in silence, she feels it. Not because you post about it, not because you hint at it, but because your absence is louder than any desperate text. And while she's out trying to validate her choice, trying to find that same energy in someone else, you've already evolved past the point of needing her validation to feel strong. And this isn't about punishing her, it's about preserving you, because the only thing worse than losing her is losing your peace. And every time you chase someone who doesn't choose you, you teach yourself that you're not worthy of someone who does, and you lose time, you lose energy, you lose purpose chasing someone who doesn't even know what they want. And if she did, she'd be clear, but she's not, and that confusion she brings is her test, and your reaction to it is your answer. So don't chase, don't explain, don't argue for your place in someone's life who made it unclear. Just step back, improve, grow, dominate your lane, and watch what happens when your silence becomes the loudest response. Because that's the paradox. When you stop chasing, they start wondering, and maybe they come back or maybe they don't. But either way, you win. Because you didn't lose your dignity trying to force a connection with someone who wasn't strong enough to maintain it in the first place. And if she can't handle the distance, she never deserved the closeness. That truth alone is enough to rebuild your foundation, but it becomes unshakable when you immerse yourself in the principles that never fail, the ones laid out step by step in the Stoic relationship blueprint. This isn't just a book, it's raw, timeless wisdom built for men who are ready to take back control of their lives, their emotions, and their relationships. It shows you exactly how to detach from what weakens you and anchor yourself in a mindset that commands respect without chasing it. And now it's available in audiobook format, so you can listen while walking, lifting, driving, or simply getting your life together. Ask yourself, how long will you keep repeating the same patterns? How many times will you allow emotional chaos to replace clarity and calm? This audiobook becomes yours forever, your private guide you can return to whenever life tries to throw you off balance. The link is in the comments. Get it, listen to it, live it, because the longer you wait, the more of yourself you lose to people who were never supposed to have that kind of power over you. Number 2, you react emotionally. You react emotionally because deep down, you've made her response the measure of your worth, and every text she delays, every call she doesn't return, every shift in her tone feels like a personal rejection that threatens the identity you've built around her attention. And when that identity starts to crumble, you reach for whatever scraps of control you think you have left, and that control almost always looks like emotional overreaction. Not because you're weak, but because you haven't yet learned how to detach your value from someone else's behavior. And the sad truth is, most men don't know who they are without the attention of the woman they want. And when that attention fades, they panic, not because they're in love, but because their emotional dependency is being exposed, and it's a brutal mirror that reflects how little of their self-worth was actually internal. And in that space of emotional desperation, they say too much, They text things. They regret. They show up uninvited. They ask questions that don't need answers. They beg without realizing they're begging, and in doing so, they destroy the little attraction that may have still been there. And it doesn't matter how much you cared or how good your intentions were, because in her eyes, you've just shown her that her approval controls your emotions, and once she sees that, once she feels that kind of emotional power over you, she can't unsee it. She can't unknow it, and most importantly, she can't respect it, because the truth is, you're not supposed to be unshakable for her. You're supposed to be unshakable for you. And when a man who claims to be grounded gets emotionally hijacked by the actions of another, he reveals that he's not grounded at all. He's just calm when things go his way. And that kind of man is not trustworthy, not even to himself, because life doesn't always go your way, and people don't always do what you expect. And if every time someone pulls back or disappoints you or confuses you, your emotions explode into chaos, you're not stable, you're reactive. And if she can cause that reaction with a simple pullback, she knows she holds your emotional state in the palm of her hand. And that's not attractive, it's not strong, and it's not something that inspires trust. And if you want to transform that pattern, you have to stop making your peace conditional on her clarity and start choosing it regardless of her confusion. Because her confusion isn't yours to fix, it's yours to observe. And the more emotionally neutral you stay in the face of someone else's uncertainty, the more you demonstrate that you are a complete person before, during, and after anyone's presence in your life. And that neutrality doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your direction than your distractions. And reacting emotionally isn't just about the outbursts or the long texts or the venting. It's the inner collapse the moment you start questioning your own reality because someone else changed theirs. And if you've ever sat staring at your phone wondering what you did wrong, refreshing a message, hoping it changes anything, you've felt that collapse. And it doesn't matter how smart you are or how many books you've read in that moment. You feel powerless because your sense of security was outsourced to someone else's attention. And when it disappears, you think you've lost something vital, but you haven't. What you've lost is an illusion, and if you're brave enough to sit with that discomfort without reacting, you will find clarity, because pain reveals truth. And the truth is, you were never in control of her behavior, only your response to it. And most of you are responding like scared little boys, trapped in the body of grown men, because you've never learned how to sit still with tension, how to let space be space, how to let silence be silence, without trying to fill it with desperate noise. And the woman pulling away is not the problem. Your attachment to her response is, and until you address that, you will keep losing yourself in the emotional highs and lows of other people. And that's not love, it's addiction. And when you react emotionally, you feed the addiction. You tell yourself that this connection is everything, because if it wasn't, why would you feel so much? Why would it hurt this bad? And that's the trap. The idea that intensity equals importance, but it doesn't. Intensity just means you've given away too much of yourself, and now you're bleeding for someone who hasn't even asked you to. And maybe you think that's noble. Maybe you think love is supposed to hurt. But it's not love that hurts. It's attachment and expectations and ego and fear. And the more emotionally reactive you are, the less safe you become, not just to her, but to yourself. Because if you can't trust yourself not to spiral every time someone pulls away, you're not in a relationship. You're in a prison, and she's the warden with the keys. And that's not her fault. It's yours, because you gave her that power, and the only way to take it back is to build a life that doesn't move every time she shifts her energy. And that kind of life doesn't happen by accident. It happens by choice and repetition and discipline. It happens when you get up and go to the gym, even when you don't feel like it, when you set goals and move towards them. Regardless of how your emotions are flaring, when you stop chasing comfort and start embracing discomfort, because that's where strength is born. Not in feeling better, but in doing better, even when you feel like hell. And if you want to stop reacting emotionally, you have to stop treating your emotions like facts. They're not, they're signals, and just like any signal, you can choose how you respond. You can sit with it, you can breathe, you can wait. And in that wait, you find power. Because the ability to pause in the face of chaos is the beginning of mastery. And if she comes back and you're still solid, that's attractive. But if she comes back and finds you broken, shattered, needy, she doesn't feel closer, she feels disgust. And that's the harsh truth. Most won't tell you because they want you to believe that vulnerability means emotional explosion, but it doesn't. Vulnerability means being real about your feelings while still honoring your boundaries. And if your feelings cause you to break your own standards, that's not vulnerability, that's weakness, and no one respects that, not even you. So next time someone pulls back and you feel that wave of panic rise inside you, sit with it, breathe, write it out, go lift, go create, go do something that reminds you of who you were before she showed up. And if you don't know who that is yet, then you have your answer. You've been using her as a shortcut to avoid becoming someone real. And the pain you feel now is the call to finally face yourself and build from the ground up. And when you do that, when you stop reacting emotionally and start responding intentionally, you'll find a kind of peace that no one can take away. And from that peace, you'll make decisions not based on fear or scarcity or need, but on truth and power and direction. And that's what turns her head, not your pain, not your paragraphs, not your pleas, but your presence. The presence of someone who has become so solid within himself that no amount of emotional withdrawal can shake his core. And that man is rare, that man is irresistible, and that man doesn't just keep women, he keeps himself. Number 3, you overtext and over-explain. Text after text becomes a slow leak of your self-respect, pouring validation into someone who isn't even asking for it, while convincing yourself that more words will fill the gap her silence is creating, when in reality, each sentence you send without her response chips away at your dignity. And what most don't realize is that over-explaining and over-texting never come from strength. They come from fear, from a deep unspoken belief that silence means rejection. And if that rejection is left unanswered, then it must be filled immediately with justification, apologies, clarification, or desperate attempts to reconnect. But what you're really doing is pleading for a response that no longer wants to come naturally. And anytime you need to over-explain your intentions to someone who's already shown disinterest, you're not clarifying, you're negotiating your self-worth. And the more you explain, the less power your words hold, because attention isn't won through explanation. It's won through presence and detachment, and presence isn't typing faster or longer, or sending paragraphs about how you feel or what you meant. It's standing still while they drift away and not chasing with words. Because silence is a language too, and those who are grounded understand that the moment you try to convince someone to stay through text, you've already lost their emotional investment, because people don't respond to logic when they're emotionally distant. They respond to energy, they respond to confidence, they respond to the space you give them to question their own withdrawal, and over-texting kills that space. It suffocates curiosity, it screams insecurity, and the truth is, most men use texting as a way to escape sitting with their anxiety. They need an answer, not because they need her, but because they can't stand the lack of control. And in that lack, they flood her with words, trying to stabilize what has already fallen apart. But have you ever stopped to think why you keep sending those messages when you know they won't change anything? Is it because you believe she'll finally understand? Or is it because without her reply, you don't know who you are anymore? And if that's the case, then the messages aren't about love, they're about identity. And that identity has been hijacked by a need for someone else to validate your emotions, which means you've handed over your emotional power to someone who hasn't even earned the right to hold it. And this is why so many men lose themselves in the talking stage or early dating phase. They mistake texting for connection, and when the energy changes, they don't adapt. They explain, they overcompensate. They try to bridge the distance with more words, not realizing that words don't build connection. Presence does, and presence isn't digital, it's energetic. And if your energy is reactive, needy and desperate, it doesn't matter how carefully you craft your messages, they land with the energy of panic. And panic is unattractive. It pushes people away. It confirms to them that they hold power over your state of mind. And in that dynamic, love dies, because love can only exist between equals, and over-explaining makes you unequal. It puts you beneath the pedestal you built for them. And if they reply, it's not out of attraction, it's out of pity or obligation. And that kind of attention only deepens the wound and convinces you that the more vulnerable you are, the more they'll care. But there's a difference between vulnerability and emotional leakage. Vulnerability is saying the truth with strength. Emotional leakage is pouring every feeling into their inbox, hoping it will resurrect what's fading. And if it didn't work the first time, it won't work the 10th. And you know that. But the addiction to closure keeps you texting, keeps you explaining, keeps you hoping that one more message will flip the script. But the only script that flips is the one where you stop speaking and start acting, stop reacting and start building. And building doesn't mean replacing her. It means replacing the part of you that thought constant communication was the solution to everything, because when you stop over texting, you start hearing yourself more, and what you hear in that silence is uncomfortable. At first, it's the realization that you've used communication as a shield to avoid rejection, as a crutch to avoid silence, as a bandage for your abandonment issues. And that realization hurts, but it also frees you, because now you get to choose differently. Now you get to choose discipline over impulse, strength over reaction, and clarity over confusion. And clarity isn't found in someone else's reply. It's found in the stillness after your last message, where you sit and resist the urge to explain again, and instead ask yourself, why am I seeking validation from someone who clearly isn't seeking me? And that question will wake you up, and if you're ready to hear the answer, it will change everything, because no one who truly values you needs 10 texts to understand you. And if they do, it's not clarity they lack, it's interest. And you can't text your way into someone's heart that doesn't already want to let you in. And every time you try, you devalue yourself a little more. So stop explaining. Stop over-texting. Stop trying to be understood by someone who doesn't even take the time to listen, and instead start becoming the kind of person who is so rooted in his own clarity that whether they respond or not, whether they stay or leave, whether they ghost or return, your peace remains untouched, because you no longer need to speak to be heard. You are already loud in your presence, loud in your standards, loud in your actions. And when that energy meets someone who's aligned, you won't need to say much, because they'll already feel it. And until then, be okay with being misunderstood by those who were never meant to understand you in the first place. Number 4, you make yourself too available. Availability without boundaries quickly becomes desperation in disguise. And once someone sees that your schedule, your emotions, your attention are always ready for them at any moment, regardless of how they treat you or how inconsistent their effort is, they begin to see you not as a high-value presence, but as an emotional vending machine, someone they can push a button on and get the validation they want. And nothing kills attraction faster than the realization that someone is emotionally available on demand without requiring respect or reciprocity, because it tells them you're not choosing them from a place of standards, but from a place of need. And when need becomes the driving force behind your attention, it no longer feels intentional, it feels transactional, and no one respects what's given without cost. Especially when that cost is your self-respect, and making yourself too available isn't about texting too much or always hanging out. It's about positioning your life around someone else's availability, treating every last-minute invite like a blessing, changing your schedule to match theirs, putting their needs before your priorities, and believing that by showing them you're always there, they'll finally see how valuable you are. But what actually happens is the opposite. The more you offer without being asked, the more they take without thinking, and eventually they don't appreciate it. They expect it, and what was once a gesture of care becomes your new baseline, and anytime you pull back, they frame it as an attitude change or accuse you of playing games. When in reality, you're just waking up to the imbalance you created by overgiving, without checking if it was being received with gratitude, and making yourself too available. Also shows up in the small things, always texting first, always initiating plans, always being emotionally open, even when they're emotionally closed, always being quick to forgive, even when no apology is offered. And every time you do that, you reinforce the idea that you'll tolerate less than you deserve, because your fear of losing the connection is louder than your commitment to protecting your peace. And that fear makes you stay when you should walk, makes you talk when you should wait, makes you explain when silence would say more. And if you've ever had someone disappear after you gave them your time, energy, consistency and presence, you know how painful it is to feel like everything you offered meant nothing. But what you don't realize is it wasn't what you gave that ruined it. It was the fact that you gave without standards, that you were there too much, that you responded too fast, that you made it too easy. And people don't respect what's easy. They consume it and move on. And if that's been your pattern, it's time to understand that availability is only attractive when it comes with boundaries, when it's balanced with purpose, when it's chosen, not automatic. And to rebuild your value in someone's eyes, you have to start by reclaiming your time, your attention, your energy. And the first step is learning how to say no without guilt, how to stay busy, not to appear uninterested, but because your life actually has meaning without them. How to stop apologizing for prioritizing your goals. How to stop explaining why you're not free at the last minute, and instead let them experience the consequences of inconsistency, which is not access and not attention. And when they feel that space and realize that access to you is earned, not guaranteed, that your time is reserved for people who show up with intention, not convenience, that your emotions are shared with people who prove they can handle them with care, that your focus is not a default setting, but a privilege you extend to the few who deserve it. Then and only then do they start seeing you differently, not as someone who's always there, but someone they're lucky to have, because that's what makes someone irreplaceable. Not how much they give, but how clear they are about who they give it to. And availability should be a reward, not a right. Something that's offered in response to consistency, effort, clarity, and not confusion, inconsistency and emotional laziness. And the more you practice this, the more peace you'll feel, because you're no longer bleeding for people who wouldn't lift a finger for you. And your life will start to reflect that standard, because you'll find yourself attracting people who value your time because you value it first, and pushing away those who only stayed because they could walk in and out as they pleased. And while it may feel lonely at first to not always be available, it's in that space that you meet the most powerful version of yourself, the one who doesn't fear silence, who doesn't chase closure, who doesn't beg for attention, because they've learned that being needed is not the same as being valued. And value doesn't come from being present all the time. It comes from being present on purpose, from showing up with standards, from choosing connection, not clinging to it. And if you're tired of being taken for granted, of always being the one who cares more, who tries harder, who gives everything and receives almost nothing, it's time to make yourself less available, not to punish others, but to honor yourself. Because the person who gets the best of you should never be someone who made you feel like an option. And if they want the privilege of your presence, let them prove it not through words, but through effort. And until then, stay focused, stay grounded, stay disciplined, and let your availability become a rare and priceless experience, reserved only for those who show up like they actually deserve it. Number 5. You try to win her back. Trying to win someone back who has already shown hesitation becomes a slow act of self-abandonment, because the very act of trying proves that you are placing their indecision above your clarity, and in doing so, you communicate with every word and gesture that their doubt matters more than your peace. And the moment you begin to negotiate for a place in someone's life who is willing to walk away without looking back is the moment you betray your own instincts. Because deep down you feel the energy shift long before they leave. You feel the distancing, the vagueness, the emotional coldness. And instead of stepping back and letting their behavior reflect their intentions, you jump into survival mode. And survival mode doesn't look like strength. It looks like proving. It looks like overcompensating. It looks like becoming what you think they want, hoping they'll choose you again. But in doing so, you erase everything that made you attractive in the first place. You stop being the man who was centered and start becoming the one who's orbiting their moods and availability. And the tragedy is most men don't see it until after they've said too much, after they've begged, after they've reshaped themselves into an emotionally submissive version of who they once were, all in the name of getting back something that may not even be good for them. And the truth is, no one who values you leaves without explanation and comes back without effort. And if they can walk away, and you feel the need to chase, to convince, to fight for a place in their world, they're no longer trying to hold space for you in, then you're not fighting for love, you're fighting for your own insecurity to be silenced. And when you try to win someone back who is pulling away, you don't pull them closer, you push them further. Because attraction doesn't grow from comfort. It grows from clarity and groundedness. And when you turn yourself into a servant for someone who's not sure about you, you lose their respect. And worse, you lose your own. And that loss shows up in everything. Your voice changes, your energy shifts, your confidence fades. And instead of being the person they were initially drawn to, you become the version they're now trying to escape. And still you try harder, you offer more. You think if you just say the right thing, if you just show how committed you are, if you just prove how deeply you care, that maybe they'll see the light and come back. But that's not how human nature works. We are drawn to what we can't fully control, not what we've already conquered. And when someone sees that they have full power over your emotional state, they stop valuing your presence, because what's easy to obtain is easy to forget. And you become easy, not because you are, but because your behavior tells them you are. And maybe you've justified it. Maybe you've said things like, but we had something real, or they just need time, or I just need to remind them who I am. But here's the truth, if someone can forget your value because of time or distance or temporary confusion, then they never truly saw your value in the first place. And reminding them of it shouldn't come from begging or proving. It should come from your silence, from your absence, from your unwillingness to participate in a dynamic that makes you small. And it's not about being heartless or cold. It's about being aligned with yourself. Because the man who is aligned doesn't chase what walks away. He lets it go, not out of ego, but out of respect for his own path. And the man who tries to win back someone who's pulling away places their feelings above his principles, and that imbalance is felt even if unspoken. And when someone senses you've prioritized them over your self-worth, they begin to feel guilt, not attraction. They begin to feel pressure, not admiration. And that pressure becomes the nail in the coffin, because now they don't just feel unsure about the relationship, they feel responsible for your emotional well-being. And no one wants to be responsible for someone else's self-esteem. And that's what happens when you try to win them back. You hand them the power to determine how you feel about yourself. And when that happens, you've already lost. And maybe they come back. Maybe they say they just needed space, but the moment they return to a version of you that bent, broke and chased to get them back, the dynamic never recovers, because now they don't return to an equal. They return to a servant, and they treat you like one, not out of malice, but because that's the role you played when they pulled away. And instead of rising, you kneeled and trying to reverse. That is almost impossible. And even if you manage to rebuild the connection, you do so from a place of imbalance, from a foundation where they are the prize and you are the pursuer, and love cannot grow in that soil. Because love needs respect, and respect needs boundaries, and boundaries are destroyed when you try to win back someone who didn't fight to keep you. And the solution isn't revenge or pettiness or pretending you don't care. It's building a version of yourself that would rather be alone than tolerated. It's becoming so focused on your mission that anyone who walks away does, so knowing they can't be replaced, but they will be outgrown. It's waking up and choosing to stop chasing breadcrumbs when you're capable of baking your own bread. It's understanding that love given out of fear is never received with appreciation. And the day you decide to stop fighting for people who don't fight for you is the day you begin to truly live, and it's not a loss. It's a leveling up, and the man who levels up doesn't just win back his peace. He becomes the person no one ever wants to walk away from again, not because of manipulation, not because of scarcity, but because his presence is so rooted, so strong, so undeniably full that losing him feels like losing gravity, and you only get there by letting go of anyone who requires you to beg for their attention or chase their approval or prove your place in their life. Because the truth is, the person you have to win over will never truly be yours. And the person who sees you clearly will never make you feel like you need to be anything other than who you already are. And if you're still stuck on someone who left, if you're still replaying the texts, the conversations, the moments, trying to figure out what you could have done differently, the answer isn't in doing more, it's in doing less. Stop texting, stop explaining, stop proving, stop begging, stop waiting, and start building, start working, start healing, start elevating, and watch what happens, not to them, but to you. Because once you rise to that level, their pull no longer works, their silence no longer hurts, their absence no longer defines you, and that's the real win. If you're tired of chasing people who treat your effort like it's disposable, if you're done being the backup plan while she explores her options, and you're ready to become a man whose peace, power and presence command respect without a single word, the Stoic Relationship Blueprint is your next move. It's not just a book, it's your blueprint to emotional freedom, to never needing her approval again, and to building a life so full she either levels up or gets left behind. This is the kind of truth society hides from men, because a grounded, clear-minded man can't be controlled, manipulated, or broken. That's why this knowledge feels like a threat. But now it's yours, instantly, and in audiobook form, so you can absorb it while walking, working, or outliving your past. Linked in the comments. It's always yours, forever. No one can take this wisdom from you. If you're ready, comment, "I claim my power," like this video, subscribe, so more men can break free and stop wasting years chasing what was never real.